we have had some atrocious weather for the last 4 or 5 days. Heavy rains, not the kind of conditions you want to be out in, to be honest. And although it's not raining right now, it is forecasting rain again in a couple of hours. But I wanted to try to get out and do something, and I thought what I would do is take advantage of these, you know, kind of gloomy skies to try and do a bit of long exposure minimalist stuff here on the local beach. And then I thought, well, why don't I actually talk you through the steps that I go through when I'm setting up a long exposure image. So that's what I'm going to do. 5 steps. Oh, that's a bit of a clickbait title, isn't it? Anyway, I hope you'll enjoy it anyway. If you do and you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. Okay, long exposures, and I'm talking here, you know, 1 minute, 2 minutes plus exposures. And I've got a scene here that I think might work if the little sailboats don't keep coming in and out of the frame. And I'm going to talk you through the steps that I'm going through to set this up. And the first step basically is to set it up like a normal image, get my composition dialed in. Obviously on the tripod I need to get the tripod nice and solid and steady. So I'm going to do that now. And then the next thing I'm going to do as part of that first step is also get the image focused properly. I've got my composition set up using the rocks and the fence on the side of the port here coming in on the left, and then there's a bit of a gap, and over level with the horizon pretty much is the harbour wall over here. And at the moment I've got f16 and 1/30th of a second. Always good to have a reference, and I'm going to focus. I'm just going to use my autofocus on this. Probably just focus on infinity, that's fine. It's a vertical orientation, almost certainly going to be cropped a little bit anyway. So now that I've got my composition and my focus set up, the next step is to go manual. Now that's manual exposure because I'm going to be shooting in bulb mode. Now I shoot in manual all the time anyway, so my camera's already in manual. But the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to manual focus. You don't have to go to manual focus if you don't want to. If you're using autofocus with something like back button focusing, that's fine. But you want to make sure that the camera isn't going to try to focus again when you take the shot, because with the filters on it probably won't be able to, and it will hunt and you'll lose focus. So everything to manual is step 2. Step 3 then is to put the filters on and work out what exposure I am going to be able to get with the filters that I'm using. I put a circular polarizer on, and that took my exposure time to 1/10 of a second. When it comes to calculating your exposure, you can use mental arithmetic, you can use an app like PhotoPills will enable you to do it, or you can use the little charts that come with some of the filters. Now I've worked out probably somewhere between 1.5 and 2 minutes, because I know my 10-stop filter is a bit more than 10 stops. But rather than doing a 2-minute exposure and finding out it hasn't worked, I'm going to do a test shot, which is part of my third step. And that test shot is going to involve bumping my ISO up by 6 stops. So that's going to go from ISO 100 to ISO 6400. The beauty of a 6-stop difference is you can substitute minutes for seconds. So 2 minutes becomes 2 seconds. So if I do a test shot at 2 seconds ISO 6400, that's the equivalent of a 2-minute exposure at ISO 100. So I'm going to try that out and see how it works. And that looks pretty good exposure wise. No blown highlights, good histogram, not underexposed. ISO 6400, f16 and 2 seconds. So that means that ISO 100, a 2-minute exposure should work. So that's what I'm going to set up now. My ISO is back to ISO 100, and now what I'm going to need to do now is go into bulb mode. Okay, so I'm set up, I'm now on to step 4, and that's taking the picture. I'm back at ISO 100, f16, I've gone into bulb mode. Now some cameras you can set longer exposures, you can set the bulb mode as a timer for 60 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever. On mine you can't. If you're going to have to start and stop the exposure by touching the camera, you want to minimize the chance of any kind of shake. So either use a cable release, or what I use, because you can't really use a cable release on this, I either use a wireless remote, or I've got a touch screen shutter release on this. So I can tap the screen once very gently to start the shutter going, and tap it again very gently to stop it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set that up now. So turn on my touch shutter enable, and then when I tap the screen it will start the exposure running. Okay, that's my exposure running. All I've got to do now is wait. And there we have our long exposure. That's lucky, there's a boat just coming out there now. If that had come out during my exposure, that would have been a pain. The final step, step number 5, is to check the image and make sure that during the course of the exposure we haven't got any shake, either from wind or from anything else that can cause the image to get blurry. So zoom in, have a look, and make sure it's all nice and sharp. Okay, that's one. Maybe we'll try a horizontal format. Obviously I've got the camera, the tripod already in place, so I don't have to go through all of those steps again. Now it's just going to be a case of twisting the camera around, rotate the circular polarizer 90 degrees. Quite important to do that because otherwise it could affect the exposure, and then just do the shot again. I'm actually going to do one more vertical one, but this time I'm cutting out a lot of the harbour wall on the left hand side of the frame, just having a small amount just coming in from the edge just before we get to the far harbour wall. And actually for this one, I think because these are going to be black and white anyway, I'm going to change the picture profile to monochrome so that I can see what it's going to look like. I'm going to try another shot here. It's still going to be quite minimalist, but in a different way. Basically, the curve of the beach going around and all the buildings along the back there kind of wrapping around the scene. Now, because I'm substantially changing the composition, I'm going to go through my steps again. Yeah, I think the rain is coming, and that's probably time for me to beat a hasty retreat before it chucks it down again. We've had some really heavy rains here for the last 4 or 5 days, but it was nice to just get out and do something a little bit different, and I hope these tips on the way that I approach long exposures will be useful for you. I'm not saying it's the right way, I'm not saying it's the only way, I'm just saying it's the way I do it. But I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a like, share it on social media, leave me a comment. Let me know if you've got some other tips you'd like to share. And if you're new here and you've enjoyed this, don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. As always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, so thank you very much. And until the next video, bye.